move on to the second part of today's event, which is a panel conversation which will be broadcast live, but will also include participation from everyone in this room. And with us today, we've got George Harb, who we just heard from OpenText, and also Mr. Kendrick, who manages Asia Pacific Transportation for Western Digital, and who is also a committee member for the Logistics Society, joining us. Great to have you all with us today, gentlemen.
In your experience, not necessarily where you are now, but your experience, how has this resonated with you? Are you seeing this integration, or is it still a ways off?
Yeah, so of course, not just Western Digital, but applies throughout actually my whole career. Right? 20 years in logistics, and we do see all these data gaps. And naturally, we are all operating in our silos, or my team is my team, my friend's team is his team, right? And we don't usually talk. And that's where logistics needs to come back into building more efficient covering or managing the gaps that George was saying. And thankfully, when I joined Western Digital, it's a lot more integrated, right? So what we have in Western Digital is OTM, Oracle Transport Management, where we actually drive a lot of transportation from origin to destination, from suppliers to our factories to our end customers, right? And some of you are, of course, users, right? SD cards, PCD cards, and so on, right? So yeah, so it's everywhere. It's how we make use of data, how we make use of the efficiency that's out there.
Okay, so the technology, the systems exist. For George, obviously because you do this every day, right? What are you seeing is that you had 4 levels of evolution, data visibility, or evolution of the digital core. What do you see that split like?
When you say split in terms of adoption, or
yes.
Okay. Well, today I think artificial intelligence isn't really heavily used in the interpretation of data in the logistics space, or in a lot of industries. Where you're seeing artificial data being heavily used is in information service providers, in robotics, organizations which are defining or designing and developing robotics, and they're incorporating it into the way that robotics works. So it's not really being adopted. And one of the primary reasons is it's difficult. You do require data scientists, you require very solid insight in terms of how your organization works, but importantly, where you want to go. And that's always the difficult part, is where do I want to go? I may not know myself where I want to go, so can you help me and tell me where I should be going? And that's a gap. And that's where I think the simpler it is to engage with technology providers, the simpler they can make it in the way that you leverage artificial intelligence, makes it easy for you to start leveraging those tools. So to me, that's a gap that I think isn't there. But on the front end, the integration, a lot of organizations are already doing integration today. But there's still, I think, 30% of organizations said that they're completely done full integration of the business. So there's still a long way to go for essentially industries to get to a point where they're fully integrated.
Thanks, George. So, like I mentioned earlier, we are broadcasting live, and if you see me playing with my phone, it's not because I'm playing Candy Crush, right? I've got questions coming in. And for those of us who are online, we can also put the questions in the chat. So like one question that I had, which is actually quite interesting. How safe is it? Because we are talking about making that information accessible. So those of us who work in freight forwarding industry, we had one of our competitors recently have a major cyber attack. They've been out of business for 3 weeks, 4 weeks now, unfortunate for them, it could have happened to anyone. So how safe is it?
The digital core that we provide is as safe as with anything. There's always potentials for breach, right? But breach is due to human error, not due to technology failure, right? So what we do is with identity access management, right? You can actually narrow down to what a person can see or what a business can see. So you give them access to a particular view or a particular section of an application, and that's all they can see. They can't go any further, right? So you protect that with sign-on, which comes with the implementation of identity access management, and that again ensures that it's secure. But onto someone else inadvertently, right? Unfortunately, human error is always going to be something that you can't always address, right? Okay. But essentially, the technology itself is safe. One of the things is the applications that we provide, or the technology we provide, we don't allow systems integrators to go in and set things up themselves. Everything is managed by us and only us. And the reason why that's the case is we have customers around the world. We've got finance customers, we've got government customers, we've got defense customers. And so to be able to satisfy their security requirements ensures you have to have the highest level of security in regards to access to the platform.
So let me just do a straw poll. I'm not going to pick on Patrick per se. Is security a concern when you see something like this? How many of you say security is a concern? So absolutely a concern, yeah? So quite a fair few. But I guess there's no 100% foolproof solution. But I think, I mean, you know, you guys have been around for a while, and I think what George said addresses that quite well. Well, let's go to the shippers. What would you say is preventing your company from closing this data gap? Who wants to take a pun? Gentleman from the back table? Yes.
Let me try. I just came out from a meeting this morning, interesting. Coincidentally, I think the topic resonated with what you have here today. When I started asking questions to the team around, you know, if you are the boss of the company, what would one thing you want to change? And out of 12 of them, a good 60%, 70% of them still talk about silo, the challenges around silo, and the gaps around how do we even being able to communicate. Of course, COVID actually widened the gap the last 2 years. But then given a choice, this was actually one of the call-outs. And in fact, at a global level and in your senior management, we also recognize that this is also a huge challenge to us. So you could have all the best data sitting in your organization, but if the people still don't talk to each other and you don't have the walls in between, we will still have those gaps. How do you fix that?
Okay, so it's about silos. So it's not so much about the evolution. It's actually a mindset problem that we have. Yeah?
You could have actually just you could have a technology in you could be already in 2024 in terms of your technology as an example. But if the people that you have and the culture that you have are still in 1980s, there is already by design again.
Fair enough. So
Let me chime in.
yes.
Let me get the elephant out. Okay, so I'm Patrick here from GlobalX. So I'm the service provider side, right? So part of the information I would like to consolidate into all my clients, all my drivers, and all my routes, and see how else I can optimize. But I serve startup, I serve DHR, I serve that. Everyone from a silo perspective has their own technology. Right? And whatever data I try to get is on their machine that's out there. So how do I even grab this data? And whatever data I get is end of the month kind of different. So put that together, it's a different extreme.
But I think, George, in that example that you illustrated earlier, with OpenText, you can help actually bridge that, right? So keep the information that you cannot share that's proprietary. For example, a service provider that services a whole bunch of 3PLs, keep the information that's proprietary that way, but also share that information through OpenText. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely. So, excuse me. Don't run. So to address the two issues, the issue of working with these retailers or service providers, Starbucks, or etc. How do you retrieve information from them? It really comes down to each organization's desire to open up, right? So, for example, let's say a coffee, retailer opens up their system to you through a secure means, right? By leveraging a platform like ours, we provide integration. So, B to A or B to B integration, so that you can retrieve the data that you need based on agreement between yourself and that retailer. And we translate that information into your platform in the way that you want to see it. But it does require both parties to be willing to engage with that. And that's where we're still at the early phases of true value network, right? It's not there yet, but as organizations adopt these kind of integration first approach, as organizations move into the cloud, which makes integration easier, sharing information easier, we're hoping that doors will open up so that this type of experience becomes more common than what it is today. Right? On the issue in terms of users, I 100% agree. You can, and you see it today when you introduce new technology to users who've been using an alternative platform, they hate it. Even though the assessment tells you it's so much better and it's a little better performance, they hate it because you're changing the way they work, right? And people don't like change. Every organization experiences that. But the way that this type of technology that I believe can assist is if you're leveraging, let's say, artificial intelligence or you're leveraging analytics, what you start doing is you start enabling them to do their job easier by giving them more information. So you don't change the application they're using. They can still use the same application, but you start presenting information through dashboards or signals or lighting, whatever case maybe you want to use. So by bringing information to them to help them do their job easier, you'd hope that they'd be able to leverage it better. Not easy. It requires a real change and investment in making sure that you've got that ability to interpret the data the way they want to see it. Right? So one of the things that we say to organizations is if you want to digitize, you don't have to move everything in one go. You don't have to move everything into the cloud in one go. You can still leave the old applications in place and implement new best of breed. What we do is we help you integrate so that you can still use the data from the old system, right, and bring it into the new system, and over time make the change, right? And that's one of the advantages of like an integration and digital core.
I think one of the things that's made it a bit more challenging as well, I found especially the last couple of years, we've got a lot of new technologies that are coming out there. And I've got a couple of friends in this room, these, I won't name their names, but these gentlemen sitting in the front here. In the last 6 months, we've had to use this new technology, which from the start we thought wasn't going to work. So it's almost like, and of course we were accused of, oh, you guys don't want to change what you do because you're stubborn. There was also accusations of you're too close to your 3PLs. That's why you don't want to use this new system. But it finally turned out, and we just got the go ahead this week to actually stop using them. So it's not just about silos, and it's not also about mindsets. Sometimes it's also about choosing the right solution, So in this case, this organization, the two chiefs of the organizations, the service provider this technology provider, and the company that these guys work for were friends. So he said, let's use my buddy's technology and I'll get all my staff to do it. So the staff said no. And then there were these accusations. I guess you know what I'm talking about, yeah? But we just got to go ahead. So silos, mindsets, being old-fashioned. What do we do? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, what I want you to think about is integration is not about changing your application, right? It's not about changing your application. It's about how do I get the information from what you currently have to what you might have, so that it's working, the information sharing is working a lot better. So we have an example where, and as you guys, if there's any SAP users here or on the web, SAP is making a push for those from on ECC into S4HANA. And it's a massive project. It takes up a lot of resources, a lot of time, a lot of mental power in terms of getting it right. We had a case where a logistics player basically made the move from ECC to S4HANA, and after the implementation, they had to roll back. So they rolled back to ECC. And the reason why they rolled back is someone forgot to talk to the supply chain department and say to them, oh, what is it that you need to make sure feeds into your supply chain systems and applications so that you can do your job, all right? And what was missing is the integration. So you can easily move to best of breed, whatever it is, but if you don't think about what happens to my data, where will my data gap be? And how do I close that gap? If you don't think about that, it can create significant impact in terms of the way organization works. So again, what we're talking about today is not changing your application. It's about how do we make sure that any changes that you do make continue to work in supporting your business's improvement of efficiencies or margins or productivity.
And also enabling that information to be exchanged as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Do you have any questions from the audience before I start picking on people?
I've seen some people on the phone, I'll point them out.
Yeah. Yes, sir. The gentleman at the back.
But if I hear correctly, the so-called core is really about data, right? It's just data repository. I think you got an AI that you're saying that it could actually be the one. Right? I mean, I think I look at it, it's more like you say culture, it's a culture. So somebody in the organization, not just the top line organization, everybody in the organization need to buy in, right? And the person on the ground need to say that this is compelling reason by any. So, I mean, I think in my mind, I'm thinking that the data analytics is the one that where people going to interact and then how they're going to change the way I work, right? And you free me up to do maybe more value-added stuff, right? So the AI portion, have you actually implemented it yet? I mean, where you have an example to show that, okay, the AI helps mean that the AI is basically information that is given to the necessary people, and whatever information people need, they need to see. Right?
So maybe like RPA, maybe? Is that what you're talking about?
Sorry?
Like robotic process automation?
Well,
sort of
I'm just
AI?
wondering whether there's really a real-life working model.
Yeah. As I said, AI has been around for a while, so it's not new. I'm not talking about something which hasn't been done before. We have an example where it's an airport authority, and they've implemented Magellan to monitor the movement of people through the airport, taking information about which door they enter, which store they go to, what do they buy, right? Where do they go after they bought something? Do they go and eat? Do they not eat? And so what they've done is they've leveraged that information, written algorithms that monitors changes in behavior that then allows them to make decisions on where they send staff, where they send people to clean, where they send additional people in terms of to manage people traffic, right? And that is all that is all driven by artificial intelligence. It's about taking the information and then advising you have a problem or potential emerging problem in this part of the airport, right? And that is a real life example. And it's only north of you that that's actually being used. Right? I won't say the airport's name, but there's not many big airports north of you. Not that far north, but you know, next.
Every country is not.
He's from Australia.
I'm from Australia.
Even worse.
Everything's north of Australia.
All right. So, you know, the gentleman that asked the question talked about an example, and you had an example earlier of a control tower. What sort of a company was it, you know, and what specifically did you do for them?
Yeah, this company is a consumer packaged goods company. I hope you like Kit Kat. I'm not saying who it is. And essentially what they've done is they've implemented it to be able to monitor the production, but importantly feed in information on what consumers are eating, feeding information around stock inventory in terms of their distributors, and then distributors' information feeding in from the retailers. And it's all about simplifying their planning process and making sure they're not overproducing or underproducing, right? And that's essentially the control tower's main driver. But what they've done is they've obviously taken that and looking at how they can further implement other elements of their business, right? To drive a better experience. And when we talk about a better experience, these days, it's not just about a better consumer experience, it's about a better partner experience, it's about a better manufacturing experience. And that's what data does. That's what this control tower does. This is about enabling a better experience for those who are interacting with them, both externally and internally.
So Kendrick, question for you. Talking about this, working in a multinational, right? I think most of us in the room, we work for multinationals. I mean, I'm sure there are a few locals as well, but implementing something like this in your experience, in your career, you said you've been around for what, 20 years? Well, you must have started very young. Is this something normally driven, an initiative like this, driven from the head office, or is it something that we can drive out of Asia or from a local office? What has been your experience?
Okay, so I was previously in manufacturing, right? High-tech manufacturing. So we manufacture out of Suzhou, and the team was not big. So when we tried to implement such things like, you know, data integration with our suppliers, we want to get information, we wanted to go into like TMS. We did review, and most of the time it's about cost. It's about does it make sense? What's the ROI? And what are the people going to do? Is there any benefit? What's in it for us? So a lot of these decisions tends to be I'll call it penny wise, pound foolish, right? You focus on just a little money, but you don't look ahead a few years down the road how the company can grow with it. So when I step into Western Digital, the whole thing changes. Where yes, it could be a top down, but it's a very it's no longer a silo. Everyone plays their part into making the system work, into participating to make sure that the data is correct. We rely on analytics, and then we do have like fancy dashboards and metrics just for us to look at, or what's gonna delay if I click a button, or these are the providers that are going to delay our shipments, it's going to affect our revenue, and what can we do about it? Can we switch? Can we change mode? And that's what my team does in Asia, right? It's really like a control tower, making decisions based on data. Yeah. So that's significantly different. So I come from both, and I can tell you that data is really good. But what is more important is the insights that you can derive from the data. That's where the integration comes in. That's where your providers can give to you so that you make decisions. Yeah.
Okay. So let me poll the room again so that y'all don't fall asleep. So I've got roughly 4 people at each table. Say at the front table here. Centrally driven out of headquarters in the US or Europe, or is it something, an initiative like this can be driven out of Asia? How many of you say it can be driven out of your geography?
Maybe I'll take this.
Yeah. Here you go.
I think in a lot of, I'm service provider side, a lot of ours,
Shengchen?
in a lot of the cases we handle, it's largely my customer requirement. We typically go to some frequent, go to some warehousing, some integrated frequent class warehousing. So in a lot of these cases, I would say 7 out of 10, there is a requirement certain level. So from simple ones like transportation data to generate SOPs, to more complex ones like ERP integrations like AMS and TMS. So it's complicated. Yeah. So I would say a lot of cases is custom, especially the type of custom is typically removed. So especially in the past 2 years, there were so many disruptions going on. It's a big example. So of fact, it can be regional,
So it can be both ways. Okay, interesting. What about the group at the back? Central or regional? How many of you say central? So the other 2 say regional.
So I came from a manufacturing world, so I've been in the manufacturing world for a long time. Now, but many times when we talk about data, it's actually controlled by the corporate level because of they need to have some kind of a budget, right? Now, it also depends on the ground level because the ground level are the one who see the problems, right? It's never the bosses, it's never the way. So at our level, the ground level, normally we see a problems and we like to recommend. For example, we talk about EDI. EDI is 20, 30 years kind of technology, but unfortunately, until today, I still see some gaps. We don't have EDI, the customer gave us a PO, and then manually we create into our system SAP, and there are gaps. And I already see a lot of gaps, and the question here is, can we do EDI? The customers will say, okay, good, let's do EDI, we will absorb the cost, and for our side, we absorb our cost. So it's a 50-50 kind of implementation. But unfortunately, when I talk about cost, then the next level is, can we do it? The boss will want to have all this kind of justification. So all these challenges will come in. Unless there's a strong justification, then we proceed to the next level. Because every customer will have a different requirement. The kind of a format data will be different, and there will be some kind of a level of changes that's needed in terms of implementation. So again, if you ask me that questions, it's actually grounds up because the ground are the one who sees the problem and would like to recommend. And whether the justification is good or wrong, it depends. Okay, so long as we are able to convince your boss, in terms of ROI, you are able to save some kind of headcounts, then it's justified, then you proceed to the next level. It's always the case. Top level, yes. If you ask me, yes, but it all depends on the organization. Probably Kendrick, now he's with WD, and they see that there's a need to integrate all this information together. And I like that you mentioned about that. The click of button, you see where are the gaps, and you're able to identify which are the partners or whatever that's having some issues, and that's where the problem is. Now, unless the high level or the CEO or whatever, they're able to see the kind of potential, and if not, then I think it's rather difficult to drive. It all goes down to dollar and cents.
Absolutely, it's driven by a monetary problem which is either derived through ineffective resource or a cost to the business because of wastage. So wastage time, wastage in terms of returned stock, incorrectly delivered, incorrect stock delivered, incorrect stock manufactured or produced at the incorrect volume. All these errors cost money. And that's where decisions are often driven around, we should go to an automated process. And it's also growing pains. There are a lot of organizations which are still doing manual, right? They're still doing manual, but they're as you say, they're probably growing fast or have got enough other problems that this is something that I'm happy to wear it because it's not my biggest issue, right? But when you delve down deeper and we do some value engineering analysis for them, and you actually show them, okay, what's your error rate? What resources are you using? What's your cost of error? What's the impact it has on your business? And you break it down to that level and you show them the cost. The savings are, and we've done analysis, is anywhere from 60 to 70%, 80% savings. And then your C-level goes, oh, that's money in my pocket, right? But it's not a problem until you break it down to those kind of levels and you represent it as how much money can you bring back into the business that you can invest back into the business, or in some cases, invest it into shareholder returns.
Okay, so we're almost out of time. I just had one question come in, and before I ask that question, or the last question, do we have any questions or comments from the live studio audience? Yes.
Yeah, I come from a Japanese automotive class maker. Being Japanese and being automotive means we are actually very lean, but very manual. However, data to us is not a problem internally because we've been able to operate very well for the last 47 years. So it's not an issue. Until the last 2 years. I think coming to your point, supply chain is really about timing. I think this is the right timing actually to go to your C-suite. We have never had more C-suite coming to us asking what happened. Not enough love and tender loving care for the last 17 years, but in the last 2 years, too much love and tender care. I think it's about prioritization. You're quite right there, George. I think the point is how can you prioritize it? If you pay 60 million in FA versus 16 million deployment cost, what will you choose? Quite a simple answer. But before that, 16 million deployment cost will turn you away enough. I think the key thing is the uncertainty is driving a lot of need in supply chain systems. But there is one big issue that we face is actually manpower. Being a very traditional company, plug the data gap sounds easy. Compared to FMCG and other data industry, we can't recruit. It's a struggle recruiting people that are data centric to do this kind of transformation and do this sustaining this. It's a bit of an issue that we're facing at the moment. We trying to recruit for 6 months. It's an uphill struggle. So it's not just the data side, but also look at sustaining it after you implement it. You still need people to understand, crunch data. I like to use the word actionable insights. Okay, having insights is one thing. What can you do with it is the next thing. So how do we get data people that like logistics and learn how to make sense and help us save the money in the future? Not just yesterday. Of course, we do ROI as of today's operation, but I like to do ROI on tomorrow's operation. That's how I justify my business case to my CEO, and then he'll be happy about it and give me God knows how much to spend. Yeah, that's the biggest challenge here. I think not just data implementation, but sustaining the data implementation in the long run is going to be a big problem for supply chain.
If I may reply, well, to add to that, the biggest challenge organizations face is understanding what data they have. There is so much data within an organization that you're thinking, what access do I have? What do I need to do? So data discovery is one of the key steps an organization needs to do to understand where they want to go. Because it's like, okay, what data do I have for me to determine how I want to use it? And because there's been so many legacy applications that have been implemented over the years, and the intelligence of the people who implemented it moved on, and the interconnects and the integrations people don't know how it works, but they just know it's there. A lot of that effort in required to understand the first step has a big play in terms of what you're talking about, in terms of understanding how to get actionable data and how to use it going forward. So, you know, I don't like, this isn't a plugging solutions forum, but we can do that as well.
Last great question, and this is actually for the audience. Thanks, George, for that. How many companies in this room are using technology to measure or improve sustainability? How many? Show of hands. How many companies in this room are using technology to measure or improve sustainability? Just a show of hands. How many? 1, 2. Wow. Okay. 2.5. I have someone at the back going. 3. No, seriously, I have someone at the back who just went. So I think that is 2.5, something like that. Okay. Okay. Yes, the gentleman here wants to say something. Yes. Can you please speak up as well?
Yeah, I guess there's the whole technology piece involving the sustainability is actually very new, but it's quite emerging. I raise a hand because I see some of the technology surface in terms of how you embed the carbon offset into the transportation model, for example. Those technology are available. So it's a matter of so I raise a hand because I see we are starting to explore.
All right. Thanks. So I guess to the person, the gentleman or the lady that asked that question, so about 3.5 people said that yes, that's what they're doing. Okay, great question though.
Which is interesting because if you go to many, I don't know about organizations here, but if you go to a lot of organizations' websites, they will all have statements about sustainability and social responsibility.
I think that's called greenwashing. Yes. I think every man and his dog talks about sustainability, but you know, how many of us are serious? And I guess that's the reason why.
And that's where people are now being held accountable. CEOs, this is sustainability and social responsibility is a CEO problem, right? Because they're up there saying, we're all good. So when they're being investigated, if they're saying we're doing this, they're not being, they're not, and it's happened in media, you've seen situations like that, they get crucified in the media, right?
Yes.
So being able to implement, you're right, technology is available today. OpenText has access to information that can let you know very quickly whether an organization is certified, independently certified as being meeting ethical supply chain requirements. So tools are out there today. It's just a case of whether an organization is willing to invest the time and effort to take it forward.
All right. Well, thanks, George. Thanks, Kendrick. It's time flies when you're having fun, but we've exceeded our time, which is quite normal at these things. I want to thank all of you who participated in person and online. Some really good questions came in. Apologies for the technical glitches, but that was keeping it real. We did that on purpose. Yeah, we did that on purpose to show you how you can improve things if you use OpenText. That's right. Okay. So, but thank you all very much.